Hello everyone, welcome back to another part of Yami, The Winged Hero BNHA Vigilante FanFic. Be sure to like, share, and check out the author, Starlight Anon, on Wattpad. Their AL3 account will also be in the links down below. So, please give credit to the author, and be sure to check out the links in the description down below. And with that, let's begin. Chapter 25. You're all going. What? Chatter filled the once silent and gloomy classroom as Izuku slammed his head onto the desk. His blank face locked onto the wall as his toxic green eyes stayed glued to it. How he hated classrooms. The feathers on his cheeks twitched, and Bakugo stared backwards at him for a moment, before turning himself back to face the front. Kirishima quickly appeared out of nowhere and became the bright sunshine that he is, asking Bakugo to come to the mall. But the teen declined, and it left Izuku to be asked. The winged teen himself was going to do the same as the Pomeranian, only to have Hitoshi appear and put him into the conversation. We would both want to join you guys, he urged, having Kirishima smile with 20 million suns shining on it before he shoved a number onto the desk. Izuku could only assume it was a phone number. He didn't have. A phone was placed on his desk, and he abruptly turned to the sleep-deprived male. It seemed as though a question mark appeared over his head as he tilted his head in confusion. A huh about to leave his mouth. Aizawa got you a phone. Actually, use it. The purple-haired teen informed me with the added order in the end. And he was forced to add the number into his phone as Sunshine Shark. He totally didn't choose the name, and text a hi in confirmation that it was him. Oh, how it felt weird to have a phone. The day passed in a flash, as to make the mall encounter to come sooner. Izuku dreaded every bit of it as he walked next to Hitoshi, the one who caused him this suffering. He was forced to leave Haichi home. He wouldn't want more unwanted attention brought to him with his large wings. Adding a young avian to the picture doesn't fare well with a teen. So he left the bird to practice flying at the dorms. Why'd you make me do this? He asks again for the umpteenth time that hour, some sort of frown on his face, unable to identify if it was for actual sadness or dread. A sigh escapes Hitoshi's mouth. 1, you don't have everything needed for the camp, started the male. 2, I need to get stuff, and I would rather go with you than anyone else. The purple-haired teen left a rather long pause as his mood seemed to deflate. And 3, Dad wanted us to interact with people. Izuku was caught by surprise at the answer, choking on his spit from a sharp inhale and coughing. He'll say he ignored the word Dad that left his friend's lips, and wouldn't want to embarrass him for having a rightful parent finally. Is that so? The winged teen countered with amusement coating his tone, eyes sparkling in that same emotion. A nod was his answer, concluding his questions. Oh, how interesting that turned out to be. Shinsu! The teen perked at the shout. Midoriya! That name added more interest to the voice. The scent of Old Spice cologne told him it would be their resident sunshine smile of Class 1A. If you couldn't already tell, it was the person obsessed with being manly, Kirishima Ijiro. The redhead gave a shark-toothed smile to the pair in front of him, waving with his right hand. Come on, everyone's here already. He urged the two to follow with a motion of his arm before hurriedly walking back to where he came. With a glance to each other, they both followed. Other scents of classmates filled his nostrils as they got closer, him being able to identify each. At a jasmine smell, Uraraka walked towards them as they arrived, holding her hands close together. I'm glad you two came. Now we can bond better as a class. Her voice came out in a squeal-like pitch, causing Izuku to scrunch up his brows. Yeah, we thought it'd be better to come since we were missing things, informs Hitoshi, the winged teen nodding after he stopped talking. Then let's get along, she says before skipping back to the group. She seemed way too bright and peppy. It confused Izuku. He guessed that she had a fairly normal situation, then if she could act so optimistic. It seemed that way with most people at the school. He wouldn't deny that he feels a twinge of jealousy at that. He needed to warm up to the unnecessary kindness then. The chatter around him made him want to leave, but he gets reassured by a tug on his sleeve. This makes him turn to Hitoshi, uncertainty filling in his toxic eyes. He moves the gloved hand closest to Hitoshi to lightly grip his shirt. Hitoshi lets a calming look adorn his features. It's okay, Izuku, his voice is soft and comforting, urging the teen to move closer to the purple-haired male. He gulps and nods before being led by Hitoshi towards the group. Everyone turned towards them, most smiling brightly or shouting greetings filled to the brim with kindness. It felt so odd and made the teen inch closer to his friend. His feathers twitched on his cheeks, and he felt his wings shift on his back. How odd this felt for him. At least he gets to warm up to them somewhat. Then he would try his best to get used to the brightness in the air. Chapter 26. "Where should we go first?" asks their resident pink cheeks. "We should split up to get everything finished in a timely manner," suggests the class president with a chop of his hand. "Then we can get together in groups," calls Sue with a Kiro at the end, her left index finger moving to the side of her mouth. A fist was pumped into the air. "I need to get a pair of weights," proclaims Kirishima. "I need some bug spray," adds Mina as her yellow eyes scan her surroundings. This left everyone to get into small groups and split off. Izuku and Hitoshi were paired off with Uraraka and Tsuyu. As they walked, all Izuku could smell was the scent of coffee, jasmine, and roses. Both Tsuyu and Uraraka were chatting, and it seemed that Tsuyu was hesitant to involve Izuku. He didn't know why, maybe by how their quirks pertained towards each other. She, a frog, and him, a bird of prey, or because he was a vigilante. It didn't bother him as he stuck close to the comforting scent of coffee that clung to his friend. His friend paid no mind to it as they walked. He let his toxic gaze scan at every store they passed. Each was unique in their own ways, holding extravagant or noticeable bright signs that drag attention to customers. Every display was neat and made to show everything in store of their products. It made him wonder why people get some of those meaningless items. Items that won't assist them in the slightest. Foods that only bring pleasure and not nutrients to survive. Clothes that are too revealing and make you a target. It makes no sense. As did this whole trip. Getting acquainted with people seemed meaningless. What would you do with the friendships? Would it be something similar to him and Hitoshi? He didn't want to be that comfortable with all his classmates. But he'll try his best to get acquainted enough to not bring awkward tension. It didn't take long until it was just Izuku and Hitoshi. Tsuyu dragged Uraraka off for some things and left the two to themselves. He just believes that Tsuyu is avoiding them. Not like it changed anything. Hitoshi dragged him to a dango stand. His friend informed him that the dango was made from sweetened rice dumplings with a sweet soy sauce coating. He urged him to try it, seeing as he hasn't had the pleasure to try most sweets. At least, that's what the violet-haired male concluded. The teen paid for 2 sets of 3 bamboo stick dango. Its sweet smell filled Izuku's nostrils, and he was able to recognize most of the ingredients listed off by the male who bought them. He was handed a plate filled with dango and grabbed the stick, picking it up towards his mouth. His mouth opens, and he bites down on the sweet treat. The taste was filled with sugar, but it was decent. It made a small spark of pleasure light up in his toxic eyes. His reaction itself seemed to lighten the mood between the two teens. They finished their treat before continuing their walk around the mall. It didn't take long during their chatter-filled talk that they had to split up. The two of them decided to meet back at the dango stand when done, and with that, they split. Izuku made sure his wings were firmly folded against his back, not wanting to bump into anyone with them. The crowd of people overwhelmed him, but he kept a straight face. It always unnerved him to be crowded, all these unfamiliar scents blocking his sense of smell. The chatter drowned out his skillful hearing. His eyes are only able to see the crowd, unable to distinguish most. A sigh escaped his lips as he walked away from the crowd, finally slipping into an area with less people. The store he was looking for was nearby, so he was fine. He was about to take another step when a familiar scent filled his whole being. His body froze, but he willed it to continue, doing so and leading the scent to the less populated area of the mall. There was said to be a large area of abandoned stores that never get rented for over a month, always staying closed because of mysterious activity. It's fine. If he gets this bastard away, it will be fine. The scent was still hot on his tail as he kept his breathing steady, his steps even as his posture kept upright, trying to suggest he didn't know of the presence. His gloved hands slipped into his pocket. He slipped his right glove off with ease and typed in his phone. His left gloved hand gripped a small earpiece that he kept on him at all times. He put it in his ear, brushing it off as he scratched the back of his head. Each movement was calculated and meant to not be suspicious. He pressed a button on his phone, a ringing filling his ear. His left hand moved back to his ear as he pressed a small button on the piece of machinery, so he didn't have to ever move his hand up again, practically an open mic to whoever he calls. The earpiece rings in his ears a few times before clicking as a voice appears. "Midoriya, what do you need?" calls the voice of Tsukachi. He was going to answer, only to have 4 fingers get firmly placed on his neck. "Kid?" the detective calls again. Izuku's breath hitched at the hand being placed on his neck as a scratchy voice greets him. "Why, hello, Yami," the voice of one of his greatest enemies. Voice filled with a sinister tone, urging to be called upon by his master, to be praised. A pause. "Shigaraki Tamura." And chaos ensued on the line he called, shouts and orders from the detective. The earpiece that was covered by his hair, his only protection and safe net. The only reason he knows he will be okay. He let his toxic eyes form into a glare. What's the reason for this meeting? Chapter 27. He is led to a seat, the area around them devoid of the usual bustle of people in a mall. That meant he chose a good area, even if it was farthest from the main doors. His heart thumped rapidly in his chest, as he kept a blank look on his face. "Remind me your reason for being here," inquires the winged teen, as his toxic gaze turns to the corner of his eyes, up at the menace. A low chuckle rumbled in the villain's throat as his free hand lifted to scratch lightly at his neck. Flakes of dead skin fell from his neck, the smell of iron filling the air around them. The scent that the man was already drenched in. "Oh, Yami," cooed the villain with a sharp tone. "Who knew you were just a child all along?" he mocked. His grip tightened on Izuku's neck for a moment, cutting off the breath of air he was trying to suck in before the grip was loosened again. "You were foolish to drag yourself where no one else is around. You're useless on your own." That's what he thought, Izuku wanted to voice, but let the villain continue to talk as Tsukachi's voice filled his ears, needing to know his location. "I just wanted to come to the Kayashi Ward shopping mall in peace, and I needed some quiet. That's my reason for going towards the abandoned stores." He spoke in a tone void of emotion as he kept his calm facade up. A growl left Shigaraki's lips. "You're so frustrating," he murmurs, "but this will lead to your downfall." "At least no one is around to witness this," he voiced to himself, knowing Tsukachi was listening to the conversation, trying to give him the situation without openly talking to him. That caused more scratching on the side of the blue-haired villain, more flakes of skin falling onto the dark clothes that coated the villain's being. "This is so annoying," he grumbled. "Answer me this," drawled out the handyman. "Why does everyone only pay attention to you and that hero killer?" That left Izuku to ponder himself. Well, for one, the teen pauses to egg the villain on. He has morals that others can follow. That seems to anger the villain as his grip tightens. "I have morals," he growled while suffocating the teen who kept his breath in as long as possible. "I'm going to kill that damn pillar." Izuku chokes out a breath once he releases the tight grip, trying to calm his breathing. "That's not much of a goal. Every villain is trying to end All Might," he croaks, his voice hoarse from the lack of oxygen. That seemed to distract the villain from thinking, making Izuku strike. His right hand pulled from his pocket, nails at the ready as he slashed at the wrist to the hand that held him. A shout of surprise left the villain's mouth as he recoiled, losing his grip on the teen. The ex-vigilante jumped back with a flap of his wings, landing back a few feet. He could feel the bruising forming on his neck. It would swell, and it hurts to even talk at that moment. How wonderful. The man-child started to throw a tantrum, literally stamping his feet and shouting about how unfair it was. This left Izuku to rip off his left glove and throw it to the side, flexing his hands. Once the villain finished his tantrum, he charged towards Izuku with his own hands outstretched. The teen dodged a hand that wanted to grip at his arm and flapped up into the air. He landed back on the ground behind Shigaraki and had to swiftly dodge another hand directed at him. It was hard to breathe normally, the swelling of his neck protesting from the elevated breaths he let out. The place around wasn't big enough for him to fly freely, objects jutting out from the ground in every few feet's distance. It annoyed him, having to be mindful of the hands reaching towards him and the objects. Unfamiliar laughter filled his ears, 2 new scents filling his nose. The smell of spray paint and cigarettes. It caught both the villain and ex-vigilante's attention. The villain charged at them with malice forming in layers around his figure. The girl only just noticed and screamed because of the male approaching. Izuku's eyes widened, and he moved before he could comprehend a plan, shouting a run with his hoarse voice. They wouldn't be able to move out of the way. He had to push his wings faster as he moved himself in between them and the villain. He spread his large wings out and clenched his teeth as he brought his hands in front of him. It wasn't fast enough to properly counter the hands. One hand was placed on his stomach for a second, the clothes disintegrating away immediately as he got to the skin. The other was positioned on the teen's arm, only getting to brush his skin as he kicked him away. But the damage was done. His blood filled his senses as his body finally registered the pain. It knocked into him like a train, almost taking him off his feet as his wings fell, feeling too heavy to carry. The two that he protected were stuck in place, frozen, and they didn't know what to do. Shigaraki grunted and pulled himself from the ground, his eyes gleaming at the work he'd done. He was about to go for another strike, only to have a gunshot ring through the air. It didn't make contact with flesh, and the villain fled into a store to never exit again. Blood dripped down from Izuku's stomach and left arm, and he let himself fall to his knees. The pain clouded his senses as he sat on his knees, his right hand moving to touch his stomach. He felt the blood coat his hand, and he brought it up to his gaze, only to let it fall back to the ground. Footsteps rushed to him as his body fell to the side. He cursed himself for getting hurt again. He promised to Hitoshi, Aizawa, and Yamada that he would try to get less injured. A familiar face came into view, the eyes of Tsukachi locking with Izuku's. "Kid!" he shouted, so much worry coating his voice that it surprised the teen. He let out a cough, the rumble hurting his swollen and bruised throat. "I think I fucked up, detective," he hardly replied well to the worry. "God!" shouted the detective. "Why do you keep getting yourself in these situations?" His shouts were in a scolding manner, and it surprised the detective when a chuckle left the teen's lips. "Life's messed up, that's why," he answered calmly, even with the pain, far used to it, but in too much to stand at that moment. A tiny smile graced his features. "You should know that well enough." This was the most emotion the detective had seen Izuku portray. He seemed happy that the kid trusted him enough, though. "Where the hell is that ambulance? We need paramedics ASAP," he ordered another officer as he pulled gauze from the med kit he was given, putting pressure on the wounds. 10-4, shouted the officer, running off towards the front to hurry the paramedics. Izuku winced at the pressure on his wounds, his breathing ragged as his body slowly began to feel heavier. Yep, that was the blood loss kicking in. Oh, how he hated that. It didn't take long for the paramedics to arrive with a backboard and stretcher. Good thing for the stretcher, or they wouldn't have been able to carry the kid. They rolled the teen sideways, sliding the backboard under him as it took the paramedics and a few officers to place him on the stretcher, him being strapped in place. He was just glad that he didn't need a C-collar that time. Tsukachi followed the stretcher the whole way to the ambulance, keeping Izuku talking, his responses getting less and less. Less words, more time between responses. He would have left the kid to the medics and gone to investigate the other victims of the villain Shigaraki's attack. That is, if the medic didn't urge him to come along. The reason being that he knew the kid, it being better for the wary teen if someone was there to help him through this. Once he was hooked up to an Roman 4, fluids being pumped into his system as well as zero blood. How this was going to be one hell of a story to Hitoshi. Chapter 28. He laid in an overly uncomfortable bed, now clothed in a light blue hospital gown with an Roman 4 in his arm. The beeping in the room from his heart monitor irked him, being unable to take it off as they'll think he's dying. Boredom was quick to overcome him as he stared blankly at the ceiling. From rest, once he got to the hospital he passed out. He was able to heal the swelling on his throat. The bruising was still there, but not as bad. No one had visited him yet, making him assume they were getting questioned for something they couldn't control. That made him want to strangle anyone that accused his classmates of anything. Well, it seems like he's warming up enough to kill someone for them. Totally a normal thing. Tsukachi had left not long after he was brought into the emergency ward of the hospital. He had other things to do, which he believed was questioning any witness he could to get some sort of clue where Shigaraki went. The man was on a mission. The approaching sound of feet made his toxic green eyes drift over to the door. Not a minute later, and the door was opened. In came a male with horse features. His face looked like a horse, with a clipboard in his hand. If he wasn't his doctor, he would have found some fun to laugh at himself, even if he didn't like the whole feeling of laughter unless necessary, so he kept it to himself. Horseface, as he dubbed him until he knew his name, walked close to the too small bed for his wings. His wings draped off slightly, making Izuku's feather twitch in nervousness. He didn't like this doctor. The doctor seemed odd. "Morning, Midoriya. Well, I guess I should say afternoon." He talked in a plain tone, seemingly nothing off about him. It was just the look his eyes possessed. "I'm the one who helped patch you up while you were unconscious." The teen was glad he kept his phone close, it being right beside his arm, hidden from the view of the doctor. His earpiece was still in his ear, as no one chose to take it out, and the vibe he got from this male made him way too uneasy. What if they were trying to finish the job? He kept his calm facade up as he blankly stared at the male. Slowly he nodded his head in acknowledgement, not trusting his voice, as it would possibly betray him after being recently healed. His mind focused on slowly patching up his wounds enough, more so than the paramedics had, to give him a chance to run but not injure himself further. The doctor moved closer, moving over to the Roman 4 drip connected to his arm. It had a small dosage of morphine running to dull the pain, but if amped, can kill him. He knew what the doctor needed to do to higher the dosage, turn something that was closest to him. He has to observe everything to survive, to not be killed. He has to make it to Hitoshi. It posed the question as why he hadn't gotten any visitors. They wouldn't question his friends. That's not the holdup. They wouldn't be allowed if he was said to be in surgery or intensive care. Only relatives or his guardian. This was on purpose. At the motion of the doctor's hand to the morphine bag that hung beside him, he ripped the Roman 4 out, gripping his phone as he jumped out of his bed. His stomach, that he focused the healing on, ached, but not as much as his barely touched arm. The doctor's body turned a full 180 to glare at his patient. A scowl landed on their face, mixing well with the fire in their eyes. Izuku just wondered why he couldn't get a break. "You brat," howled Horseface with an added stomp of his foot. "This could have been easy. I would have gotten what I deserved. A good fucking pay if I just ended you." His voice higher an octave as he screamed at the teen. Izuku swiftly opened his phone behind his back and called a number. A person should be nearby if they were waiting in the waiting room. The soft ring of the tone whispered hope in his ears, and it only took one ring. "Izuku, are you all right?" shouted the voice of Yamada. He was expecting Aizawa to answer his phone, but this is okay. He didn't answer and glared at Horseface with such malice that made the doctor shiver before continuing his rant. "Just let me kill you already, brat," he shouted. "It's either you stand down and have this go quick, or I'll make your death painful." Yamada seemed to get the memo. "Shoo, wake up now," he screamed before talking back into the phone. "We'll be there soon, kid. We're on the ground floor in the waiting room. Hold out," he called before hanging up the phone. Okay, this left Izuku to try to protect himself. He was groggy. Morphine does that to you, idiot. And in pain? His moves would be slower, his hands not responding quick, delayed as with his legs. Once his eyes scanned the room, they landed on something that honestly shouldn't be in the room, a scalpel. His body lurched for it, his uninjured arm snatching up his temporary weapon, not trusting his own claws. Horseface tried to dash after Izuku, only to get slashed across the face with the object as he got his hands on it. This angered the adult, and he continued to scowl. Can't Izuku have a fucking break? No? Fantastic. And with that, I'll see you all in the next part. For those who are interested, we have a Discord down below. Be sure to aim for the stars, drink plenty of water, and for us to cause chaos. With that, take care until next we see each other again.